Hi everyone, welcome to grammar lesson number 14. So today we're going to be continuing with words to watch out for, and we will be covering part 6 and 7, which covers word pairs 21 through 28. So starting with words to watch out for part 6, we have, at the end, we always have 4 pairs or like 4 sets of words per each part. So for part 6, number 1 is effective, efficacious, and efficient. And then we have eminent, imminent, and imminent. And then we have sight, and sight, which are all pronounced the same. And then we have counsel and counsel. So all 3 of these adjectives derive from the noun effect. Effect and efficacious are quite close in meaning. They both mean capable of achieving a desired effect. Effective can be used of persons or of actions, but efficacious is used only of actions. So again, here, effective can be used for both in cases where efficacious is used, but efficacious is only used for action. So we have, she was not very effective at extracting confessions. And we can also say lying is not an effective way to gain people's trust. But then if we're using efficacious, then we're saying the T was very efficacious in curing Lynn's cold, or her methods were the most efficacious out of the others in the group. Now moving on to efficient. Efficient means achieving results with the least effort or expense. That should be expense, not expensive. It too can be used of either persons or the means they use. So some example sentences with efficient. Sorting the names before filing them was an efficient way to organize files. Or Russell is so efficient that he can finish all his homework in less than 2 hours. So here in the context of the sentences, efficient is being used just as the definition states, meaning achieving results with the least effort or expense. So here in sentence 1, sorting the names before filing them is a way that requires less effort. And it also probably achieves the same results, if not very similar. And then we have Russell is so efficient, achieving results with little effort or expense, that he can finish all of his homework in less than 2 hours. So next we have eminent, imminent, and imminent. These, again, are all pronounced very similarly, so I'll just be clear to clarify which one I'm talking about, because they can easily get mixed up verbally. So all 3 of these words are adjectives. Eminent means highly placed, important, or conspicuous. Imminent means about to happen, and imminent, the least common of these words, means indwelling, pervasive, and is most often used in discussions of the way in which spiritual or metaphysical entities inhabit the physical universe. So most of the time people get eminent and imminent confused. Imminent, here with an A, is not used as frequently because, again, it has a very specific meaning and a specific context in which this word can be properly used. So most of the time, the words to worry about are eminent and imminent, the first 2, and imminent, even though it can be a spelling, it can be easily messed up with a spelling error, the meaning itself has very specific context on its own. So the first sentence, Robert's position in the company is very eminent. Without him, the whole team would be lost. So this means eminent here, highly placed, important, or conspicuous. So we're just saying here that Robert's position is very important, that without him the whole team would be lost, and that just goes to show how crucial Robert's position or Robert's presence is in the team. And then we have, right after Claire exclaimed she was going to throw up, everyone knew an uncomfortable mood was imminent. So imminent, as definition is here, means about to happen. So right after Claire exclaimed she was going to throw up, people thought that she was going to be throwing up, and then that brought upon the feeling that an uncomfortable mood was about to occur or about to take place. And then the last sentence uses imminent. So some people who visited the shrine said that they had a feeling something imminent was in those surrounding rocks and trees. So referring back to the definition I have up here, Immanent, the least common of the words, means indwelling, pervasive, and is most often used in discussions of the way in which spiritual or metaphysical entities inhabit the physical universe. So they could be, this word immanent here is used, with a shrine, so it could be used in religious context, or if you're talking about something haunted or spirits or ghosts, immanent is probably the word that you're going to be using rather than the other two. Next, we have these three words that are pronounced exactly the same. We have sight, sight, and sight. So sight is a noun and a verb. The noun means the act of seeing, the ability to see, or an object of seeing something to be seen. The last meaning, active, for instance, in sightseeing. So as a verb, the word sight means to catch sight of. So just to reiterate what I wrote here, so sight is both a noun and a verb, and depending on the context, it has different meanings just slightly. So the noun of the word sight means the act of seeing, the ability to see, or an object of seeing. But if we use sight as a verb, then we mean catch sight of. So after he lost his sight, he made it his imminent mission to learn Braille. So here we're using sight as a noun because he's losing sight. You can't lose a verb, but you lose a noun, a person, place, or thing. So the thing he's losing here is his sight, a noun, and it's the ability to see. And that's the definition, specifically that we're using in the sentence. So after he lost his ability to see, his immediate mission was to learn Braille. And we have, among the many sights of our valley, my favorite is the waterfall. So sights here is being used again as a noun because among the many things, a thing is what a noun can be. So that's where we're going to be using sight as a noun, and here we're just adding s to make it plural. So among the many sights, an object of seeing something to be seen, of the valley, my favorite is the waterfall. And then the last sentence, we're using sight as a verb. So a dolphin was sighted near our boat. To catch sight of is the meaning of the verb form of sight. So a dolphin basically was seen near our boat. Next, we're going to be going over sight with a C. So sight is a verb with few distinct meanings. It most commonly means refer to, as when a writer or speaker refers to someone else's words. Citing differs from quoting in that quoting always brings in the exact language of the original, while citing more usually simply mentions or perhaps paraphrases the text where a particular passage may be found. So cite can also mean to mention a person either in commendation or in accusation. So here we have this here, which is basically like the definition I'm going to be referring to when I'm talking about cite. But then this part here is just telling the difference between citing and quoting. And just to make it simpler and paraphrase what was written there, quoting is when you're writing or you're copying the same exact language, the same words, punctuation, spacing, everything. But then when you're citing something, it is similar to the definition of cite when you're citing something, you're referring to something. So you're basically, like it says here, you're mentioning it. So in the example sentences, my teacher always cites Shakespeare during our classes. So here, cites means to refer to, so the teacher is always referring to Shakespeare during the class. In the second sentence, we have Wilde was cited in my essay because I love his writing. So here, when we're saying that Wilde was cited, we're saying that Wilde was referred to in the essay. So oftentimes, when you're writing papers for school or whatnot, you will be citing people or articles or just any other outside context. So when you're citing it, you're basically referring to it. Also, cite and citations, you probably made the connection by now, but citations is the physical, the noun for cite. And then we have this third sentence, Ronnie was cited for various violations since he never parked correctly. So here, this cite refers to this later definition. Cite can also mean to mention a person either in commendation or an accusation. So Ronnie was being accused for various violations because he never parked correctly. And the last word pair we're going to be going over, or word set we're going to be going over, is counsel and counsel. So these have very, very similar pronunciations, almost identical. So I'll just, again, be sure to be clear which one I'm talking about. So we have counsel with an I is a noun meaning a group of people who will make decisions or recommendations. But counsel can be a noun meaning either a piece of advice or someone who gives legal advice, for example, an attorney, or it can be a verb meaning advise. So again, counsel with an I is only a noun, but counsel with an E can be a noun or a verb, and they have different meanings, but very similar context, like they're both talking about advice or advising. So to keep your own counsel is an idiom meaning not to let others know what you are thinking. So, oh, by the way, this idiom, I just wanted to mention it because the counsel it's using here is with an E, meaning advice, rather than counsel with an I, meaning a group of people. So in the example sentences, we have his students agreed with the recommendations of the administrative council. So the council, we're talking about a group of people, so the group of people who are on this administrative group. And then we have the second word, counsel with an E. His parents' counsels helped him grow up to be a good and ethical person. So counsels here is a noun meaning a piece of advice, someone who gives legal advice. So that this is basically just meaning advice. So his parents' advice, his rules, helped him grow up to be a good and ethical person. So now we're going to be moving on to practice sentences for words to watch out for, part 6. So after months without rain, a drought was imminent. So here we have imminent with an A, and like I mentioned earlier, this is the least frequently used or mixed up of the three, eminent, imminent, and imminent. I don't know if that's the exact pronunciation differences, but just to make it a little bit clearer, I'm not repeating the same word 3 times. This one was the third definition, the last one, which was basically used to refer to metaphysical or spiritual beings. So we actually want to say that if we're saying after months without rain, a drought was blank, after months, if there's been months without rain, we know it's probably been dry for a really long time, so that means the drought was among us. It was going to be coming or in the future, near future. So imminent is the correct word to use because when we're saying imminent, we're meaning that something is coming, up and coming. So after months without rain, a drought was imminent. Next, we have the ointment was very effective in helping heal her cut. So this difference was mentioned first, so you guys might not remember it, so I just want to be clear. When we have effective can be used of persons or of actions. So it could be correct, but again, just for grammatical usage, we're using efficacious used only for actions. So the ointment was very efficacious in helping heal her cut. And then we have sentence number 3, the rainbow was an incredible sight to see. Here we're using sight with a C, which means to refer to. Rather, we want to mean the word sight, which can be a noun or a verb, and the noun meaning the act of seeing. So here we're saying the rainbow was an incredible blank to see. It was an incredible object, seeing something to be seen. Sentence number 4, the council had strict rules for the upcoming event. So here we're saying counsel with an E, which means advice, advising. But if we want to say that the group of people had strict rules, because again, advice cannot, well, in this context, advising cannot have strict rules. So we're trying to say the council, the group of people, had strict rules for the upcoming event. And then we have sentence number 5, James went to therapy for counseling since he wasn't feeling his best. So here counseling is used, spelt with an I, but we want to say counseling, meaning giving advice or advising something. So advising something or someone. So here we want to say you go to therapy to receive advice and help. So we want to say counseling with an E. So James went to therapy for counseling since he wasn't feeling his best. Next, we have another 5 sentences for part 6. So sentence number 1, make sure you cite the proper authors in your paper. So when we want to say that you're citing, you're referring to authors in your papers, and specifically within papers when you're citing something, it's always going to be the cite with a C. So again, we just switch this out with cite spelled with a C. So it reads, make sure you cite the proper authors in your papers. So again, just to reiterate, when you're talking about papers, then you always want to use C, cite. The next sentence, at the haunted house, Ellie thought the spirits were imminent in the tombstones. So here when we're saying imminent, the definition of imminent is a highly placed, important, or conspicuous. However, we want to say we're talking about spirits, and like I said, imminent, spelt like this, or we'll spell right here as well, refers to spiritual things, metaphysical, spirits, entities. So that's why we're talking about spirits here. We're going to be using imminent spelled as so. And then we have sentence number 3. Many adults counsel courses of action they themselves wouldn't have always followed. So here we're saying counsel as a verb. So counsel with an I can only be used as a noun. So because we need a verb here, we know that this is automatically incorrect. But for meaning-wise, if you didn't want to take into account if whether it's a subject or object, a subject or verb, noun or verb, rather than the definitions first. Counsel with an I is a group of people. Counsel is advice or advising. And counsel, again, can be used as a noun or a verb. So advising would make sense here. So many adults advise courses of actions they themselves wouldn't have always followed. Sentence number 4, his fellow co-workers were jealous of his upgraded imminent position. So imminent here means about to happen. So when we're saying he was upgraded to a blank position, when we're saying a blank position, we're probably trying to say that it's a important, unimportant, special, not special position. But here the imminent that we were confusing it with is this imminent. So eminent position is a highly placed, important position. And because they were jealous, they were probably jealous. And you can assume that if they were jealous of a important position that he had received, not a about to happen position. Because also an imminent position is not usually used in sentences. And then sentence number 5, due to Jolly's audacious plan, they made double the amount of cookies. So because we're trying to say that this plan, here was effective, we're saying that it's capable of achieving a desired effect. So when we're using effective plan or a blank plan, actually, we want to say, we want to look to the next phrase to see what kind of plan it was. So due to the Jolly's blank plan, they made double the amount of cookies. So we can assume, especially it'll be easier if there was context, but if we're making double, you probably usually only make half that amount. So here we're saying that due to Jolly's effective plan, achieving results to desired effects, they made double the amount of cookies. So now we're going to be moving on to words to watch out for, part 7, which includes word set in pairs 25 through 28. So here we have led and led, like and as if / as though. As if and as though can usually be interchangeable, and like and such as. So I know like is appearing in 2, 3, and 4, but we're going to be looking at like versus these other words in specific contexts, so you guys won't get confused. It's not like versus all of these all of the time. It's usually within the context what you would usually mix up with like. So first we have our first word pair, led and led. So they're pronounced exactly the same. The verb lead, opposite of follow, forms its past tense and past participle in led, unlike read, whose past tense and past participle are also spelled read. So the noun led, is the name for the well-known heavy metal. So again, these are pronounced the same, but we're saying the verb, when you lead, like you can lead a group, you can lead a presentation. When you're leading something, you're not following it, you're kind of taking charge, but it's past form, same definition, is just led. So you can say instead of I lead the presentation, it would be I led it, so just the past. So the captain knew he was in trouble after he led his army into forbidden territory. So he caused his army to follow his pace and follow his command. Sentence number 2, the cake looked good but weighed in her stomach like lead. So lead, what's used in your pencils, is probably one of the most common and frequently known definitions or examples of lead. The noun, not the verb. So the noun, again, well-known heavy metal. And then we have they led the herd of sheep like professionals. So if they led, this should be, well, you can say they lead the herd of sheep like professionals. You can also say they led. We just need a verb here, so we know that it has to be this word up here first, meaning opposite of follow. Sorry, I don't have a direct definition of lead and led. I just have opposite of follow. Basically, lead, led, means taking charge. Next, we have like and as. So these can get kind of confusing, 2 through 4, in part 7. So I'll just be making sure to go through these slowly and clearly so you guys don't have any confusion. So the use of like in place of as is a very common error. Like is a preposition meaning resembling or similar to. It is used to introduce an adjective phrase that asserts a likeliness between two nouns or pronouns. So 2 example sentences here we have, she wore a hat like a basket of flowers, or there's no business like show business. So just to explain these 2 sentences and why we're using like instead of as, the phrase like a basket of flowers is an adjective modifying hat, and like show business modifies business. Whenever you are tempted to use like, try substituting resembling the word, so this should be italicized, and see if your sentence still works. So before we move on to the next slide, basically we're saying that the hat she wore resembled a basket of flowers, or there's no business that resembles show business. So when we're saying like, we're meaning resembling or similar to. So now what about these sentences? She dances like a crazy person, or he breathes like a galloping horse. So the reason I'm saying that this is tricky territory is because in this previous slide, I said like is a preposition. So when you have a preposition, I always usually say that you can kind of mark it off with commas, and the sentence still would make sense. So if we said she wore a hat, period, then she wore a hat. We have subject, verb, object. It's a complete sentence. And then we say there's no business. Again, it's still a complete sentence. It makes sense. However, we have like here, and the tricky territory is as follows. So it might seem that the phrase really modifies the verb, in which case they should be adverbial clauses of comparison, as a galloping horse breathes, for example, or as a crazy person dances. But in fact, the phrases are best seen as predicate adjectives, even though the words dances and breathes don't seem like linking verbs, because they are meant to describe the subject. So when can't you use like? So in this sentence, I wish I could speak loudly like my friend does. So like never introduces a clause, only in a phrase. So again, like never introduces a clause, it only can introduce a phrase. So as is what we want to use in this sentence. As is a subordinating conjunction used to introduce a clause of comparison with the meaning in the way that. So, in the way that should be italicized here. What I'm underlining is the meaning for as, so in the way that. So we're saying, I wish I could speak as loudly as my friend does. If we're replacing it with the meaning, as we did earlier with like and resembling, we say, I wish I could speak as loudly in the way that my friend does, and that makes sense. If we're going to use like, which is incorrect, we will be saying, I wish I could speak loudly resembling my friend does, which again, you don't exactly put the definition in and see if it reads correctly, because it still could read correctly but not make sense. But if we're saying I wish I could speak loudly resembling the way my friend speaks loudly, that's not grammatically correct. We want to say in the way that your friend speaks loudly, or in the way that something. So here is when you use as instead of like. When you're introducing a clause, you use as, but when you're introducing a phrase, you use like. And again, if you're unsure, you can substitute resembling or in the way that and slightly modify it to see if the meaning makes sense in the sentence. So now moving on to word set pair number 3. We have like versus as if and as though. So again, as if and as though can be interchangeable. So This error is even more common than like and as, and mixing those two up. So Miss Sarah looked like she was going to cry. And you guys have probably heard this sentence or this order many times, but it is incorrect. So like is a preposition. Remember, it cannot introduce a clause. So the clause here, she was going to cry, it can't introduce that. So use as if or as though. So both of the sentences following here are correct. So Miss Sarah looked as if she was going to cry. Same thing or same meaning as Miss Sarah looked as though she was going to cry. So again, like cannot introduce a clause, only phrase. So that's when we use as if or as though. Next, and the last pair we have is like and such as. So what is wrong with the following statement? Julie won't eat meats like pork, lamb, and beef. So like I mentioned before, when you're having trouble between specifically like and as, you can plug in resembly for like, or plug in the way that for as, and see if it makes sense and see which word is the correct word to use, which isn't always 100% foolproof, but it will definitely help you guys remember what word to use. So here we're saying try plugging in resembling for like and see if you have, and you will see the problem. So pork, lamb, and beef are not meats similar to the ones Julie won't eat, similar resembling to the ones Julie won't eat. They are just examples of the kinds of meats she won't eat. So such as is a handy preposition in this situation. So instead of saying Julie won't eat meats like pork, lamb, and beef, we're saying that she won't eat meats that are similar to pork, lamb, and beef. And while that may be true, that's not what the sentence is trying to say. So it's correct to say Julie won't eat meats such as pork, lamb, and beef, because pork, lamb, and beef are examples of the meats that she won't eat. So that's why we say such as. So another example sentence would be the number of explosions in action movies such as Mission Impossible 2 often seems excessive. So we wouldn't say the number of explosions in action movies like Mission Impossible 2, because when we're saying like Mission Impossible 2, we're meaning similar. And while that can mean, while that meaning does make sense, like to use like, grammatically you want to say such as, because Mission Impossible 2 is a direct example of movies where the number of explosions seem excessive. So I know that can be a bit confusing, so we have some practice sentences to really go through and nail down these differences. So sentence number 1, she wore a blue dress as Chloe's. So we want to say that she wore a blue dress that resembled or was similar to Chloe's, and that's when we use the word like. So she wore a blue dress like Chloe's. And it should say Chloe's dress or Chloe's blue dress, but just to make sure that the difference here, we're saying like instead of as, because we're saying it's resembling the blue dress that Chloe has. Sentence number 2, after the scolding, Johnny looked like he wanted to run away. So if we're saying that he looked like he wanted to run away, it's kind of like saying he looked like he was resembling he wanted to run away. So that's what we're going to be saying as though. So after the scolding, Johnny looked as though he wanted to run away. So again, like cannot introduce a clause. So we have he wanted to run away, and that is a clause. So we have to have as though here because it can introduce the clause. Like only introduces a phrase. So here if we had Chloe's dress is a phrase. There's no verb in those two words. So if we're just saying Chloe's dress, we're introducing a phrase, and that's when we're saying like. But here is a clause, he wanted to run away. We have a verb, object, a subject, and a verb. Makes it a complete sentence. It's a clause. So that's why we say as though instead of like. In sentence number 3, we have the size of the lead Jenny needed was sold out at the stationery store. So lead here, L-E-D, is the past tense verb of lead, meaning opposite of follow, to take charge. So that's why we say lead, pronounced the same way, just with an A, meaning the heavy metal. So the size of the lead, the pencil lead, for example, Jenny needed was sold out at the stationery store. And quick reference back to words to watch out for, I believe it was part 4 or 5, stationary versus stationary. Stationary with an E is meaning writing supplies, but stationary with an A means to stand still. And then sentence number 4, flowers like tulips, roses, and lilies are very uncommon. So these flowers, we're talking about tulips, roses, and lilies. So when we're saying like tulips, roses, and lilies, we're saying similar to. But instead, we want to be saying that these flowers listed are direct examples of the flowers that we're talking about. So flowers such as tulips, roses, and lilies are very common, is what we want to say. So this is very similar to the Julie won't eat meats like versus such as. So here we can have the similar thinking process, because we want to say that tulips, roses, and lilies are the examples. They're not just similar to something. Sentence number 5, the mother goose accidentally led her children into a muddy puddle. So led with an A means the heavy metal, but led without the A is the past tense of the verb lead. So that's why we want to say the mother goose accidentally led her children into a muddy puddle. Led the baby geese followed the mother into the muddy puddle. So the next set of practice sentences, I wish I could dance as confidently like her. So when we're saying like her, the sentence we would have would be, I would be giving away the answer, but it's right here anyway. So it's, I wish I could dance as confidently as she does, as her dancing. So that's why we're introducing a clause. So her dancing. So that's why we say, I wish I could dance as confidently as her. Not similar or resembling her, but as. But as meaning that in the way that she dances. So I'm just double checking the slides. Yes, so as meaning in the way that. I just want to double check the definition I was giving. So as in the way that she dances. So that's why we would use as instead of like. Sentence number 2, the dark clouds make it look like it will rain soon. So we want to say as if it will rain soon. However, another reason we know that is because if we have it will rain soon, that's a clause, a full sentence. So like the preposition cannot introduce a clause, it can only introduce a phrase, but it will rain soon can stand on its own, it's a clause, it's a complete sentence. So it makes sense standing on its own. That's why we introduced this clause was as if or as though it will rain soon. So again, as if, as though, both make sense in this, interchangeable, as long as we have either of the two saying preceding it will rain soon rather than like. Sentence number 3, I only like to wear dark colored clothing like black, navy blue, and brown. So here we're saying the colors because they are direct examples of the dark colored clothing or the dark colors. So instead of saying like, meaning resembling these or similar to, we want to say that they're the exact examples. This is similar to the tulips, roses, and lilies sentence, also the Julie with the meats. So here we're saying instead of like, I only like to wear dark colored clothing such as black, navy, blue, and brown. Sentence number 4, she jumped as a horse. That doesn't make sense because we're introducing a horse, which is just a phrase, so we were going to say like the preposition. So she jumped like a horse. And also like a horse, it's describing, so it's a preposition, like I said before. Sorry if I'm being repetitive. So if we just said she jumped and we marked off like a horse with commas, she jumped makes sense. So that's why we have like a horse is just like a preposition. That's just a further way of proving that like makes sense in this sentence and is grammatically used correctly. And then the last example sentence is the lead on the floor left marks on the student's shoes. So again, led without an A, L-E-D, is the past tense of the verb to lead, but then led with an A, meaning the heavy metal, or like pencil lead is just a very common example, is what we mean. So that's why the correct sentence would be the lead on the floor left marks on the student's shoes, led with an A, meaning the heavy metal. So those are all the example sentences and content for today's lesson. If you guys have any questions, do leave them and I will make sure to answer them. And thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next week.